thank you for joining us again, Matt. It's really great to have you back with us.
Thank you so much, Amy. I have been looking forward to our conversation.
No, the last one was great, so I'm looking forward to the second conversation about the second book. So tell us, first of all, a little bit about UnEngaged, where it came from, and what's the premise?
Happy to. First of all, thank you so much for having me back on. I really, as you just mentioned, I thoroughly enjoyed our first conversation. And so when I heard from you about a possible second conversation, I was absolutely thrilled. So I'm honored. And so thank you. Thank you so much. The second book, actually, the idea for the second book came during the writing of the first book. I'm not sure if I mentioned this the first time we talked or not, but when I was writing the first book, literally about maybe a third of the way through, I started to have this uneasiness inside of me of, this is not the book that I want to write. I wanted to write a book on leadership to leaders. And that's just not how the first book kind of, I guess, developed. And yet I had this very strong sensing of just keep writing, keep pushing forward, keep pushing on. And I did. And when I finished the first book, it wasn't that I wasn't satisfied. I mean, the first book's called Unsatisfied. But I had the sense that, okay, there was a different idea that I had inside of me that did not get developed. And so, I was honestly, I was confused by it. I was a little frustrated by it. And because I really had another idea in mind. And so, when I finished the first draft of the manuscript, that it went to my editor, and that turned into basically a complete rewrite of a lot of the book. It was my first book, right? I didn't know what I didn't know, and luckily I had enough good core concepts that we could work with it. But my editor was amazing, and she coached me and she taught me. And but then as we were completing the rewrite, the idea for the second book came, and became more clear. And so I literally started writing when we were at the beginning stages of the publishing process of the first book. I started writing the second book. And so now that I can look back on all of it, I realize, oh, wow, okay, I'm so grateful for the way that it happened. In the first book, I introduced this model. It's called the Flourishing Life Model. And I am able to unpack that. And I apply that more for, it is to leaders, but it's really to anyone who's interested in learning and growing and really living life intentionally, in purpose, living life intentionally and purposefully pursuing those things that bring purpose, meaning, and satisfaction to our lives. And rather than pursuing those things that our culture and society say are important, because I think you and I would both agree that what our culture says will bring you lasting happiness and joy and satisfaction doesn't work. I mean, it's like grasping sand, right? It just kind of slips through your fingers. And so, but had I tried to write in my second book what I covered in my first book, it would have been lost. It would have been a bunch of gobbledygook. So I was able to take the second book and build on the principles that I introduced in the first book. But then, but I specifically focused in the second book then on how do you apply the Flourishing Life Model to organizational life. So how do you do it in organizations? So leaders, how do you intentionally build an organizational culture where your people can flourish? Oh, by the way, Mr., Miss, Mrs. Leader, it starts with you. If you're not intentionally pursuing a flourishing life, how do you think that you're going to create a culture where your people will? And so there's that aspect of it. And then the other aspect is, what are the pillars of a flourishing organization? And this really came to me during the latter part of writing the first book. And it was through a lot of research. It was a lot of experience over the years, but it's looking, and so basically came up with 3 E's. So empathy, empowerment, and excellence. And in talking with leaders and doing interviews and just doing, quite frankly, periodical and book research and academic research, really those 3 concepts just keep coming forward all the time. And so I present that in the second book as well. The second book is very different than the first book. I really wanted to try a different style of writing, a style of writing that has been very impactful on me over the years. and that is put it into a story, so a narrative. And so there is a fictional story, all based in reality. I've changed all the names to protect the innocent, right? But the story that I tell is a true story. It's obviously it's fictional, but it's a true story. It's all based in truth. And so that's the way I introduce these 3 pillars. It's the way that I apply the Flourishing Life Model to organizations. And it's also the way that the whole third, so it's a 3-part book, just like the first one. First part talks about the Flourishing Life Model. Second part talks about the 3 E's. Actually, I got that backwards. 3 E's, empathy, empowerment, 3 pillars, empathy, empowerment, excellence. Second part of the book is applying the model. And the third part of the book is all about integration and application. So basically it's I call it a field manual. If you want to build an organization that intentionally invests in its people, builds a healthy organizational culture where people can flourish and reach their maximum potential, their optimal potential, here's your field manual.
And who doesn't want that? Who goes into business and doesn't want people within their business to feel as though they're rewarded and adding value and fulfilled within their roles? Like all leaders should want that, because you get far more reward yourself from building those organizations. But I think that's part of what I liked about the book, Matt, is the fact that you're not just sat reading it. You can see my bookcase looks a bit like your bookcase. You can sit and you can read these books and you can take in some of it, but actually it is a field manual. It does ask you the questions. It does make you reflect at the end of every section. And I love the part where it's sort of, you introduce a concept, then you explain it and break it down, and then you show people how to integrate it into their business, which makes it much more impactful than just as a great story. Oh, I learned a bit. There's a couple of snippets from there, but actually for the however many hours I've just spent reading that book, I'm probably going to implement like one thing, maybe, if I remember, when I get back to work and I sit back at my desk. But it's really powerful the way you put it together, because it forces you almost to integrate the lessons that you've learned.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. I try to be very intentional in both books, actually. And that's, as you mentioned, in each section, I tried to, my goal was to put together thoughtful questions that would make you both ponder and apply. I'm a big believer that, I love books. So you can see behind me, I'm in my study. And so this is one bookcase of 11, and they all look like this in my study. And I've read every one of these books. I love books. My wife thinks I have a little bit of an obsession with books. She's probably right. I love books. I love to learn. Here's the thing. If a lot of books, even though they might be wonderfully written and they might be just have some amazing concepts in them, unless the reader is intentional about how it's integrated and applied, you're left with this book of, wow, that had some really cool ideas. Okay, next book. And what I wanted to do was bring something to the world that was a little more intentional about integrating and applying it, because I don't believe we just need more concept and philosophy. I think we need to show people this is what you can do with it. And oh, by the way, this is the difference it can make in your life and in the people that you lead and work with and live with.
And I guess a distinction that I suppose, or a question, not a distinction, where I'm coming from, typically I speak with founders, managing directors, people that have started the business, and maybe it's been a labor of love, or it's been a passion project, or you scratch your own itch, or you start something because you want to add value. Where's the distinction between that and a leader of a FTSE 50, and maybe it wasn't their dream and it isn't their baby, but they're now the leader of that organization? Where's the distinction in terms of building a flourishing organization for them?
Yeah, great question. So I would say that I have a similar. My practice is I work a lot with family businesses, and many times they're second, third generation. But so they're often not the founder, but they took over from the founder. But I also work with some founders directly as well. What I would say is oftentimes I'm working with people that are passionate about their people and about creating a place where people want to come to work. And they want to proactively address things like, okay, why is my turnover rate so high? Why are they not engaged when they come to work? Why do people, I don't want people to dread coming to work on Monday morning, and I hear this over and over again. And so this book is written to those people that want to proactively address those things. I mean, it's just in some of the research that I've done, even since before the book and now since the book has come out, when you are proactive and you're intentional about building a healthy culture, your turnover rates will go down and your engagement rates will go up. I mean, turnover rates cost 25 to 400% of a person's annual compensation every time you turn a position over. And engagement, if people are unengaged or they lack engagement, it costs up to 40% of productivity. Both of those point directly to the health of the organizational culture. And so I wanted to provide something for people that are passionate about that and want to do something about it. So that's one end. On the other end, corporate. How do you capture the imagination of leaders in corporate? I'm a big believer that if you're in a leadership position, I don't care if it's in a lower management, middle management, upper management, senior management, executive management. I don't really care what level of leadership you're in. If you're going to be a leader, then I believe that leaders have a higher responsibility, a higher calling, and a higher duty to other people. And if they don't care, I'll use that in quotes, if they don't care about their people, if all they care about is how fast can I move up that corporate ladder so I can get into the corner office, then I would say you should seriously check your motives as to, why are you doing this? If it's all about money and it's not about people, man, please do us all a favor and do something else with your life, because along the way, you're gonna hurt a lot of people, and you're gonna cause. I mean, there's a reason why that there is things like corporate chaplains, and there's access to corporate plans like psychology and counseling and those things, because people get hurt, people get traumatized, and oftentimes it's by bad leaders who are selfishly motivated, who are narcissistic. And we've got to do something about that. And so I want to reach both, and I want to reach leaders though. But here's the thing. It's the old proverb that you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink, right? So you can provide these tools to leaders, but at the end of the day, they have to decide what they're going to do with their life. They're going to have to decide what they stand for and how they're going to lead. I can't make anybody do anything. All I can do is present resources, share my heart, and try to inspire. But at the end of the day, they have to decide. And when their head hits the pillow at night, it's just them. There's just them, right? It's just them with their career or whoever they are, they go to bed with, and they have to decide if they can live with themselves.
And I suppose it goes back to that old adage, doesn't it, about leaders are custodians, and they're custodians of an organisation. More so in corporate, maybe they're a custodian of the organisation. But I think now more than ever, you're a custodian of people that you serve and work for and with. And so I agree with you. There's a massive responsibility on leaders, especially now when people are under so much pressure. I mean, we've got the cost of living crisis. We've got people who are going through all sorts of stresses and strains. And so leaders need to be mindful of this. They need to be mindful that they're creating fulfilling roles, that they are engaging their people and making sure that the time that they invest at work is valuable for them and for the organisation. So I'm guilty sometimes. I get on my soapbox, Matt, and I'm massively about building organisations that create great jobs, because I think if people spend a lot of time at work, they should have a fulfilling role that adds value to them, their career and their lives, and they go home happy, and the more, it's all, I hate the word fluffy, but often it's called fluffy, that bit, isn't it? It's called soft and it's called fluffy, and it's the nice stuff. But there's a science to this as well, isn't there? It's not just let's create great jobs and let's make sure that everybody's happy when they go home. Actually, like you say, the difference can be up to 40% in terms of productivity if people are disengaged. And it's $8.8 trillion now globally is the impact of lack of productivity.
Is it that high now?
A crazy amount of money.
The last studies I saw was less than that, but it doesn't surprise me at all.
No, there's a study last year, and it's something like 340 billion in the UK alone, which is a ridiculous amount of money.
Yeah, I saw a study it was 2000, it was just prior to COVID, so I think it was 19, and it was well over $1 trillion here in the U.S. I think it was actually like $3 trillion here in the U.S. that lack of engagement was costing, and so I'm sure that's much higher now.
And so let's get back to the book then, because these themes are great, and clearly, but we're both really passionate about it. But talk to me about the 3 E's, because I think they're really powerful and often. Well, tell me, are they always sequential?
No, they're not. And that's the thing that I get that question quite a bit. I want to, if I could, I want to go back to something you just said, and then I'll jump to your question. And that is the fluffiness of it. I've run into this lately, and I think that you're onto something there, because this, I have a couple of dear friends that are trying to help me, I guess, get the word out, help me build my business, because it's not easy to try to sell. People want to know what's in it for me. If I hire you as a consultant or whatever, and, what is the benefit for me? And what's the value that you're going to bring to me? Great question. Fair question. I'd ask the same thing. And my response has always been, really, the fee you pay me is irrelevant, because if you implement what I'm going to train you and your team in, your turnover is going to go down. Your engagement is going to go up to the point that your benefit to your organization is going to far outweigh the cost that you're going to pay me. And I try to quantify that as much as possible. The biggest hurdle I'm having in the organizations that believe that, they open their doors wide open, but most of the organizations, and unfortunately, I do mean most. Now, I'm not sure if that's 51% or 80%. I haven't figured out what that most is yet. Have a point of view, a perspective that what you just said, oh man, that's really fluffy. And I just don't know about that stuff. And it's so I don't know how to get the word out that it may seem fluffy, because soft skills, right? Soft skills. We're working on soft skills. I'm of the opinion that your soft skills are what's costing your organization 10 times more than your hard skills. And so it's not fluffy.
Yeah,
it's real.
No, absolutely.
And it is scientific.
Yes.
But okay,
yeah.
Anyway, 3 E's.
But just to go back to your point, because it's that soapbox. I can't come down, Matt. I can't come down. But
I'm sorry, I just give you more fuel. I know, but
yeah, no, but we're clearly both really passionate about it. But I think where leaders often they want the result, but they feel it often. I think it feels like the work that has to go in, it almost disconnects from the result. So the feedback that I often get is, oh, we've got the values, we've got that. People know what they should be doing. They know why the company exists. They know, but it's about operationalizing those values, isn't it? And making sure that it's not just the writing on the walls, and making sure that people do eat, sleep and breathe it, for want of a better phrase, but that it's threaded through everything. And I think that's the distinction. It's the distinction between the art and the science. Like, we see the art, we understand it, but it's the science then that needs to be communicated almost.
And my passion is trying to integrate those two. Yes, there's art. Yes, there's science, but they're integrated. They're not separate. And, it's you can't do one without the other. And it's trying to convey the importance of that. You just said values, for example. Every organization wants to have the best mission statement, vision statement, mission statement, and values of any organization. And I can't tell you how many organizations I walk into, and they'll have, their vision statement on the wall. They'll have their values listed and on the wall and full display on the break room or conference room or whatever. And it's wonderful. And one of the first questions I ask people is, okay, are your values, and I don't do this, what I'm getting at is this, I don't come out and directly ask this, but what I want to know is, are your values aspired or practiced? Which is it? Because if they're aspired, then what are we doing to move the organization to make those aspirational values on your wall, to make them actual lived and practiced? And if they're practiced, wonderful, then you're ahead of the game. But if you start doing a survey of the people and you find out that they basically are making, and this has happened to me more than once, where they're basically poking fun at the values that are written on the wall. It's like, compassion, care, excellence, bull crap. We're all about making money and that's it. It's just about money, money, money. Okay, now that's a practice value. So I get it. Profit is important. You have to make money. But if your people, if that's all they think that you care about as a leader or as an owner of an organization, guess what? You're going to have a workforce that turns over and is not engaged.
And I think even a step before that, they need to be authentic, don't they? They've got to be practiced. They've got to be aspirational. Like Enron had integrity in there for you. They had integrity written on the wall at Enron, and I don't think I need to say any more than that, other than I've just outed myself as being in my mid-40s, just for the fact that I've got that information. But it's that, isn't it? It's the fact that they are just words if you allow them to be. And I think the work that you and I are trying to do is to make sure that they're not just words, and that they are authentic and they are aspirational. So good. I really enjoy speaking with you. So go 3 E's, go for it.
3 E's.
I was stepping down off the soapbox.
Okay, sorry that you hit one for me too. So we have a mutual soapbox. So anyway, we can go on the speaking circuit. We can talk about Amy and Matt's soapbox.
I'd love that. Let's do it.
Be fun. All right, sign me up. Okay, 3 E's: empathy, empowerment, excellence. Do they go in any kind of an order? The answer is start where you think you could make the quickest win. Start there. And so, because at least you're making some progress. And so, empathy, I talk about in really, basically it's about restoring humanity to organizations, right? So how do you do that? Treat people like people. Listen. So, and I give examples. I give actually a model, and I give examples of how to train this, how to do this, but listen effectively and take the time to know people. You know, one of my favorite exercises to do, and this is considered fluffy, one of my favorite exercises to do with leadership teams is to get them off-site, hopefully, but if not, at least in a conference room where they can't be disturbed, and just say, okay, share your story. And I don't mean the Cliff Notes version. I mean the full-on version. I had this experience literally just a few months ago. Great company. They did probably, I don't know, there were over 100 million in annual revenues, and I had the entire leadership team in a room. There was 8, 9 of us, and basically they looked at me. We had the whole afternoon blocked out, and so the CEO, I pulled the CEO aside before the meeting, and I said, "Okay, here's what we're going to do first. We're going to go around and we're going to share a story, and everyone is going to share their story, and I want you to go first, and I want you to tell your full-on version of your story." And he's like, "What do you mean by that?" And I said, "Just share your story." And he looked at me and says, "Okay." So we get in the meeting and I say, "Okay, Mr. CEO, I want you to share your story." And he says, "I was thinking about this," and I'm sitting there cringing. I'm like, "Oh no, what are you going to do?" And he said, "I want you to go first." Now I'm the consultant. I'm not part of their team. I guess I am I guess I am now part of their team. And I said, "Oh, okay, fine. I'll go first." So I took a half hour and I shared my story, and I shared the good, the bad, and the ugly. And then the CEO went, and then the next person. Amy, by the end of that time, people were almost in shock in a good way. I had a couple of guys in tears. There were 7 men and 2 women. And afterwards, the CEO came up to me. The CEO and the CFO both came up to me, and they said, "We've worked with these people, some of them for 30 years, and I've never heard their story. I've never heard that about them." You know, one guy they had hired like 5 years prior, and like, "I've been trying to get this guy to open up to me. He won't talk to me." And he says, "I'm not sure what just happened in there," but he's like, "This guy just shared his entire story." He said, "I had no idea he was going through some really tough stuff." That team now, I keep hearing some amazing things. They are the level of empathy that they have for each other, compassion they have for each other, understanding. It has increased their level of engagement with each other. They are listening better. They're engaging in better conflict together. So now they're working through things faster. They're getting to decisions, making better decisions together. People don't feel like they have to hide. They feel like they can actually share their voice because they feel heard. And so that's empathy. Not every team is ready to start there. Okay. This team wanted to start there, but the CEO drove that. So he's like, "I need to work on empathy first." And so that was his call. But I have another organization that wanted to start on excellence. And in excellence, we start with your vision, mission, and values.
Well, just before you go on, just going back to empathy, what do you think it was that enabled that? Did you give them the space to have those conversations? Did you give them permission to have those conversations? Or do you think it's the fact that you went first?
I think that what happened was when I share my story, I talk equally about my failures. Actually, I talk probably more about my failures and my embarrassing stuff in life, the hard things that I've gone through, as much as I do my successes, probably more so than I do my successes in life, because I'm a big believer, at least this is this way for me. Maybe it's because I'm the way I'm wired. I'm hard-headed, driven, I'm a high D on DISC. I'm an 8 on the Enneagram, an ESTJ on Myers-Briggs. And so it just screams hard-headed. So for me, the most important lessons I have learned in life have been through the really difficult things that I've experienced. And so I share those. And so then the CEO then felt like he then had permission to share his hard stuff in life, which the team had never heard some of that. He found out that he was actually fired from a job. Nobody knew that. Nobody knew. I think they knew that he left an organization. I don't think anybody knew he was fired from it. And so it just was like, like one thing after this, kind of like, oh, wait, this is a safe place to share my stuff, my junk in particular. And people started sharing their junk. Now, they shared their good stuff too. We had laughs. It wasn't like there was this black cloud over the room. There wasn't at all. It was this freedom that was in this room. It's literally like people had this, almost like this exhale of, oh, I can just be real here. I don't have to put on this professional corporate front here, right? I can take this mask off and you can see me. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And it sounds like a great session, and I wish I was there.
Oh my. It was, and Amy, I have had those. I cannot tell you how many times I've had those. But going into it, I get this response. I even had it from this corporate CEO. It's like, man, that just sounds really, touchy feely and fluffy. And he didn't use the word fluffy, but he did use touchy feely. He said, that just seems really touchy feely. We're a manufacturing company and, we're, dirty and it's like, we're going to do that. What? And at the end of it, I can't tell you how many times he thanked me.
Yeah. It's powerful, really powerful. Yeah. And so you were moving on then to excellence next, excellent. I think.
Yeah. So in this case, literally the organization or it wasn't even the CEO, it's one of his people contacted me and said, hey, we really need help with empathy in this organization. And he had heard me speak at an event. And so he was like, we just need desperate help. And so my question is your CEO open to that? And he said, yes. And so there was an open door there. Another organization, they contacted me and they said, hey, we heard you. Again, a lot of my opportunities have come through speaking engagements, which I'm grateful for. Some have come through referrals too. But another one contacted me and said, hey, we heard you speak. We've been trying to develop a vision, mission, value statements for the last, I think, 3 years, and we just can't seem to get it. We're stuck. Would you come in and help us do that? And I said, absolutely. So we got a couple days off-site, actually, which was beautiful. Then limits distractions. And so we were able to start working on their vision statements, mission statements, and value statements. And, we started with all aspirational, really good stuff. But then by the time we were done, it was a blend of aspirational and practiced. So it was like, okay, guys, we're doing these things really well. Let's put those, integrity, customer service was really high for them. I think communication, something like that. But it's like, we're struggling with authenticity, but we want to get there. And I think transparency was another one. We want to get there too. And there's a third, I can't recall right now what it was. Might have actually been empathy. But anyway, so that company wanted to start there. Now they want to move to empowerment. And then to empathy. They want to do empathy last. I think that was it. It wasn't empathy, it was empowerment. That was one of their values that they aspired to. They wanted to be an empowering company, and they weren't there. They were very much command and control. So that company started with excellence.
And those three things, they need that vulnerability up front to go through, to find that authenticity, to have transparency. You almost need that vulnerability, don't you? And so then is it the same exercise?
Eventually it will be. Like I said, they wanted to start with excellence. And so I did talk to the CEO after about, listen, if we want to grow in authenticity, transparency, and empowerment, I recommend that we focus on, these things next. And so I said, we can work on empowerment and really talk about, what does it mean to effectively delegate? How do you manage well? How do you lead well? Let's talk about leadership, management, delegation, those things, accountability. Or we can jump to empathy and really unpack transparency and authenticity. And he said, I don't know that the team is there yet. And so he said, can we just move to empowerment next? And then he says, I think that more time together working through these things will then lead to the team being more ready then and receptive to getting in the room and sharing story. So, and I respect that, the leader, it's his call. He knows his team. And so that's fine.
And I guess that's the nuance, isn't it? Do you start with the art? Do you start with the science? Maybe that's the nuance of whichever organization you do or whichever leader you're working with.
And I don't want to, and to that point, Amy, if I try to push my agenda or push the way that I think it should be, I'm not going to be working with many clients at all, because they'll basically say, well, what gives you the right to determine, the proper order and the right, and so, my preference is empathy, empowerment, excellence in that order. That's my preference. However, what I'm learning in practice is I really don't care where we start as long as I have the opportunity to work with you through all three. Because if we have the opportunity to work through all three, and it may take 2-3 years to do it, I don't know. We could probably blast through it in 6 months to a year if you want to move quickly. That's fine. But if you really want to integrate this and make it part of your culture, make it part of your language, your culture, and really see it change, give me 2 years with you, and we can transform your organizational culture. And I use transform with caution, because I believe that word is overused today. But I have seen organizations, I've seen lives transformed just by intentionally and proactively addressing organizational culture. People, here's just one anecdotal story. It's with an organization, another manufacturing company, a little smaller, family business, second generation company. And I'm interviewing their shop floor people. Like, they had 50 people total in the organization. I come to this one guy and find out that he had started there right out of high school. And I said, well, did you have dreams of going to college? And he said, I was in college material. He says, I barely made it through high school. And he's like, and he said, I got into some trouble with the law during my senior year of high school. I did some, drinking, got arrested, spent a couple of nights in jail, whatever, got into some drugs. And he's like, so I thought my life was, lost. And he says, and I found this place. They offered me an internship. He said, I actually did well. He says, but more importantly, while I was here, he's like, they actually cared about me. He's like, they cared about me as a person. He says, they came to me and said, hey, how can we help you? How can we support you? And they didn't mean in my job. They knew that I was struggling with drugs and alcohol. And it's like, they got me help. And this was he had been there, I think, for almost 20 years. Over that 20 years, they helped him go to college. They paid his tuition, and he's now a college graduate. I think he has his associate's degree. He's working on his bachelor's degree right now. And literally now, with emotion, he had tears coming down his cheeks, but it was positive emotion. He literally said to me, he says, the only way they're getting me out of this place is in a pine box. He says, I'm never leaving this place. He says, I'm valued. They said they love me here. And it didn't mean like they love me, look at me, I'm so great. That mean they genuinely love me. They see me, they care about me. He's now in a shop floor management role now, and he hopes to be in a shift manager role eventually. And so, those are the kind of stories that I'm hearing on a more regular basis with organizations that genuinely care about their culture and intentionally and proactively address it.
And that's the difference it makes, though. It impacts people's lives massively. You're a long time at work, aren't you? And so if you can make that better for people, you can make it more fulfilling, and it makes your organization much more productive. It's a no-brainer for me. And obviously I'm going to be biased, but it's a no-brainer. The impact that you can make on people's lives is phenomenal. And so let's move on to the third E then. So we've got empathy. Yes. Yeah.
So empowerment really is all about hiring, training, onboarding, training, and then releasing people to do the job that they're hired to do. So many organizations, from my perspective, fall down in two key areas. Once they hire people, okay, recruiting and hiring is a whole nother ball of wax. We can get into that as well, but that the need process is there too. But anyway, onboarding is so stinking important. And here's what oftentimes happens, right? Especially in today's labor force, where people are desperate to fill positions. So they get somebody hired, and the supervisors are like, I need a person. They get somebody hired, like, great, give them to me. And they throw them in their job and they say, there's your job, go do it. very little training, no onboarding at all regarding culture, right, of the organization. I'm a big proponent, have a very intentional onboarding process, and and make it longer than you think you need it, and focused on things like culture. Train in those things. Let the people experience the people. Take them around. Introduce them to as many people as possible. Obviously, the larger the organization, it becomes a little more challenging. If it's a smaller manufacturer, especially like a family manufacturing firm, which is a lot of my clients, you can literally walk the shop floor and say, hey, this is Joe. He's been with us for 12 years. His wife's name is Shelley. They have 3 kids. They live blah, blah, blah. Hey, over here, this is Nancy. She's been with us for 10 years and her husband is Frank and they have 3 kids and blah, blah, blah. And you can do that thing, right? And, take them around, show them where the break room is, show them how to use the copy machine, show them how to use the phone, show them where the restrooms are. I can't tell you how many organizations I'll walk into and they're like, yeah, my first day of work, I didn't know where the restrooms were. I know the break room was. I didn't know any of that stuff. Right. And so it seems trivial maybe, but it's not. It's so important. And I'm a big believer that if at all possible, the highest level possible in an organization, family business, CEO needs to meet the new hires, needs to spend time with them. They need to hear from him or her. They need to share with the new recruits, why this organization is so important to him or her. What's the vision for this place and how this new hire contributes to that vision, so that I don't care if you're an entry level or if you're hired into the senior level. You need to understand how what you do contributes to the long-term good of this organization, not just to the bottom line, but what is the good that we're doing in the world as an organization. If we're a medical supply, if we're a medical supply manufacturing firm, hey, we supply these things that are implanted here that help people walk. That's pretty cool. Oh, by the way, we make a lot of money too. That's secondary, so it is okay. So anyway, so onboarding is big. And then when they're trained, let them do the job you hired them to do. And this is where empowerment really starts to matter. And so I'm a big believer that you train them, you equip them, you make sure they have the appropriate resources, and then you give them the authority that they need. You transfer authority to them. You make sure that responsibility is both transferred and received. I see this. I take responsibility for this job. That means both for the process, the activities, and the results. There's authority, there's responsibility, there's accountability. I'm accepting accountability, and supervisors, I'm going to hold you accountable for the results. And then there is the results. So I understand the expectations up front. These are the expectations and the results that I'm expected to generate in this role for me and my team. And then finally, there's the consequences. What are the rewards and consequences if I'm successful in this role or not successful in this role? And then not hovering, not micromanaging, not processing the person to death. Say, hey, I need a daily report that's 15 pages of everything you did today. No, if you need that, you didn't train them appropriately. I'm sorry. It's okay to get reports and it's okay to get feedback, but do it in a cadence that makes sense. Have a weekly one-on-one or whatever it is that you want to do. If they miss the results, don't a lot of people then focus on the results. Then we got to work harder, work longer, whatever. No, go back upstream. Look at the activities and analyze those. Chances are that there's a problem in the activities. So if you're having wrong activities, you're going to have wrong results, right? So, all right. So I just threw a lot at you. So I'll stop for a minute, let you
keep going.
Now you got me on a soapbox. So.
So just on that empowerment piece, though, I completely agree with you in terms of training people, empowering them, and letting them get on with the job that you hired them to do. But I think there's also an element of staying close enough to them to know what their aspirations are in terms of their development. So going back to the example that you shared before about the college graduate, so that's another type of empowerment, isn't it? If you stay close enough to people, often when I go into organizations and they'll say, oh yeah, everything's going great. Yeah, appraisals went by the wayside. Everything was going great. We've grown really quickly. Appraisals kind of we didn't have time to sit down and have those conversations. And I think too often appraisals and those sort of manager one-to-ones, they're linked to productivity. And so when things are going great and they're productive, that almost falls by the wayside. But an element of empowerment is, yes, everything's going great. Yes, you're doing a great job, but where are you going next? And I think that links into the empowerment piece. I just wanted to get your take on that.
Absolutely agree. In fact, one of the things that I talk about in my training is it's a piece that kind of bridges between empowerment and excellence, because it covers both, is performance optimization. And so how do we, and this is very individual. This is working individually with every team member in the organization. And it's looking at, okay, fine, what are the annual, the quarterly, the monthly, the weekly, and the daily cadence of touch points. And so I'm a big fan of management, but walking around, managers engaging, if not daily, then every other day minimum, and I'm talking about, big meetings or whatever, just a touch point of saying, hey, you know what? I see you. I see what you're doing. You're doing really well with that. Or if there's something that can be improved, hey, have you considered doing this way or whatever? So that, and then I'm a huge fan of weekly one-on-ones or bi-weekly one-on-ones, whatever fits the organization, where, just an hour, and the first half hour you give to the team member so they get to determine the agenda. They can talk about whatever they want. Work, not work, doesn't matter. And then the supervisor gets the second half of that agenda, the second 30 minutes, and then they get to talk about whatever they want to talk about. This is the place you begin to talk about, okay, what are your dreams? What are your aspirations? Okay, you're doing this thing now. Where do you want to be next year and the year after that and in 5 years? And that leads to, hey, let's put together an individual development plan and I believe that should be an annual process okay, let's put together, and unfortunately those things are often onerous. And I try to say, hey, make them as simple as possible. One goal, one professional goal, one personal goal. And then guess what? Let's give some resources, support to help them actually achieve it. Someone wants to go back to school and get a degree. Let's figure out what we can do. Maybe we can't pay full tuition. Maybe we can pay for one class. I don't know. But, whatever, maybe we can buy them some books. Maybe we can send them to a training. I don't know. Whatever it is, let's put our money where our mouth is as an organization. If we say that people are our most important asset, and I hear that all the time, huge believer that that's true, then we have to invest in those assets. Yeah. So, then there's quarterly, monthly. Yeah. But anyway, those are, I'm a huge fan of performance optimization, which is very individual, and it's team, but it's also very individual.
It links into the retention as well, doesn't it? Because if you're looking after your people, they're in the right place, they feel as though they're adding value to that culture. The only reason they're going to leave is because they don't see the opportunity, or they relocate, or they have a life change or something like that. But if you're not aware of the type of opportunities that they're looking for, you can't possibly provide them. And so I'm a big believer those conversations need to happen if you want to look at your retention and you want people to stay with the organization.
Yeah, and I think it also provides the opportunity to have, heart-to-heart conversations. If you have somebody that is really just performing very well and has a lot of leadership potential, and then they say, hey, I want to be the CEO of this company someday. Well, if it's a family-owned business, probably not going to happen. But it gives you the opportunity to say, listen, we think that you could be the COO someday, or maybe the CAO or whatever it is, but CEO probably not going to happen. But if that's what you really want to be someday, is to be the leader of your own thing, then we're going to help you acquire those skills. And then when time comes for you to go, buy a business, start a business or whatever, guess what? We're going to celebrate that.
And maybe you become a client. Maybe you become a supplier. Yeah, the world works. Maybe you become a competitor and you make us up our game again. Who knows? But I agree. And it all links into the empowerment piece, doesn't it? And so in terms of, if you can go back and talk to us about the Flourishing Life Model as well, because that's it's revisited in this book, isn't it? But for the people that haven't yet read the first book or haven't listened to our first conversation, just talk us through that, because I think it's key to understand the model in itself. So the accelerators and the sort of crossover between, it's almost like an Ikigai model, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. It really is. Yeah.
So you'll explain it far better than me, Matt.
I've had, you're not the first person that's compared it to that. So I'm fine. I embrace that. So the Flourishing Life Model, as presented in the first book, that is, it's repurposed, if you will, in the second book. People ask me, do I have to read the first book to read the second? The answer is no. I explain enough of the model in the second book as applied to organizations that you do not need to read the first book first. I'd love it if you would. So always looking for book sales, but you don't have to. And so, but really the Flourishing Life Model, the same levels in both books. So the first is diminishing. These are people that in the workforce, they've disengaged. They're there just to punch the clock. They don't see really they're not motivated to do their job really at all. They're there simply to collect a paycheck. And that's it. And there's, that's very difficult, especially if they're like isolated and secluded, which oftentimes they are, if they're in a diminishing status. They don't see how they fit. They don't really care if they're there or not. But they have to have a paycheck. So that's diminishing. Next, the next level up is, I hate it when I blank out. Wow, is that bad or what? So you have diminishing, you have surviving. These are people that they get up, they go to work, they do everything they can to get their job done, check all the boxes as quickly as they can, because then they want to get home. They'll put in the hours that you ask them to put in. Don't ask them to put extra in. They don't want to do that. They'll work overtime, maybe. Obviously, they want paid for it. But they're just figuring out how to survive another day. Getting through it. Then striving. So striving is, they begin to have almost like this awakening that, you know what? I want to try to better my life. I want to try to better my career. I want to try to better myself. So I'm going to try to add skill sets. I'm going to hire a coach or a mentor, or I'm going to try to get education, or I'm going to look for, how can I expand my contribution here at work? So this is my lane at work. I'm going to go to my supervisor or whatever and say, hey, is it possible? Can I shadow in this lane? Can I learn this skill over here? Can I work in other areas? Whatever, maybe like a rotational kind of a thing to learn more. So that's striving. Then you have thriving. So thriving is, these are the people that they're getting it done. They just are. They're getting consistent results day in and day out. These are the ones you look at and they're say, these are the rock stars of the company. They just do it well. They're the rock stars on the production floor, the rock stars in sales, the rock stars in customer support, whatever it is. You give them a task, you give them a job, you give them a project, you give them a team to manage. They just knock it out of the park, and you don't have to worry about them, right? So that's thriving. Then flourishing. Flourishing is, and you might say that, if we have a workforce of thriving people, wouldn't we be successful? The answer is most likely, yeah. You'd have a very good company. Is that sustainable though? And here's the case I make in the book. Flourishing transcends the results mentality and getting things done. Flourishing is all about, how do I reinvest myself, what I've learned? How do I prepare the next generation now, the next person to take over from me and make them as successful as possible? It's really focused on succession. It's really focused on, I want the next person behind me to be more successful than me. And that might even mean that at some point you take a step back and you actually let that person lead and you support them. Flourishing is all about, I have been given to, I'm going to give back. I have been invested in, I need to invest back. And every organization needs these kinds of people in their organization that are looking beyond themselves. They're looking beyond just what's in it for me. They're looking for the greater good of the organization of, at some point, I'm going to clock out for the last time. And, what's going to happen to this organization after I clock out for the last time? Sometimes we get to do that by choice. Sometimes we don't get to do that by choice. And so it's really it's a broader perspective of, okay, this is what I have to do today, and I have to do it really, really well. Oftentimes the people that are thriving do then transcend into flourishing. It may take some time to get there, but those are the ones you want to tap for coaching, mentoring, training your organization. Those are the ones you want to pass on the culture of the organization to the next generation.
And I think there's so many organizations that maybe stop at the thriving. point. Everything's like good's the enemy of great, isn't it? There's lots of organisations stop at thriving, but I think you're right. I think the distinction is absolutely sustainability, but it's almost, we spoke at the start of the podcast about creating that safe space. There almost needs to be a confidence to be able to do that. So one of our values at Human is hold the door, because we want to, if we develop a new process or we do something new, we want to make it easier for the person that's coming behind us. So you document it and you create it, and we encourage our clients to do the same thing. But there has to be a confidence that you're not putting yourself at risk in doing that, almost. So how do leaders go about creating that safe space for people to feel as though they can hold the door and the person that's coming through that door is not going to knock them over and kick them out of the organisation, for want of a better phrase?
Yeah, great question. And I think that, again, I'm a huge believer, let's just have a conversation. Let's communicate. Let's put together a plan. If it's let's just say if it's a 1-year plan or a 2-year plan for succession, and then this person's going to come in and take over your role. And then it might mean, and then after that, we want you to take this role, or we want you to then maybe move into more of a coaching, mentoring role. Especially if somebody's approaching retirement. If they're not approaching retirement, then it'd be like, hey, you do this, then we want you to do it again for this person over here, then do it again for this person over here. But it's just a matter of putting together a plan and making sure it's communicated, and then work the plan. I think that what happens so many times is you start down this path and you don't have a definitive plan put together. And so then, things like fear get in the way, ego starts to get in the way. You promote somebody, and then they're like, well, okay, I got this, get out of my way now. Well, if that's the case, then, do we really promote the right person? I'd have to ask that.
Matt, we've ran over time, but it's been a brilliant conversation. I really, really enjoy it. I feel like we could have gone on all afternoon, and maybe we should one time.
That's great. I'd love that. Yeah, I feel like we just scratched the surface on so many things. So
yeah, totally. Well, let's do it again sometime. But thank you for now. Thank you for joining us again. And it's great to see you.
My pleasure. Thank you so much, Amy.
Thanks for listening to the Human CEO podcast. If you enjoyed this conversation, please help us share more leadership content by liking and subscribing. If today's episode got you thinking about unleashing the full potential of your organisation's culture, we've got a great next step for you. Take our free assessment at humanculture.scoreapp.com to see where your organisation stands and discover actionable insights to elevate your workplace culture.